Hockey Inside Out, brought to you by Videotron.
Welcome to our holiday edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm joined today by Michael Farber from Sports Illustrated and Dave Stubbs of the Gazette. We're going to look back on some of the memorable holiday hockey games over the years. Dave, I think you forgot to do up your bow tie this week, though.
If it's good enough for Brian Burke, it's good enough for me. Holiday season, I figured if Burke can leave his undone, why not?
And I messed up my hair and counted him also. We talk about holiday games, obviously the 1975 New Year's Eve game, 3-3 tie between the Red Army Soviet team and the Canadians. The greatest hockey game ever played, Michael?
Not even close. It was a great game, but certainly from a Canadian perspective, it's the most romantic game. What made it special beyond the score were the fact that these were club teams playing, and you rarely saw that. And you throw in the geopolitical nature of hockey at the time, a couple of years after the Summit Series, and it was a very important game. But in terms of the quality of the hockey as opposed to, say, the '87 Canada Cup final, or even the '96 final here where the U.S. came back late on Canada, it's down the track.
The anxiety in Montreal before that '75 New Year's Eve game was off the charts. I think fans in Montreal still remembered how Canada came out of the gate that first game in that Summit Series, and it looked like the Russians were going to be blown out of the building, and then of course they wind up coming back and beating Team Canada, and this entire city had a nervous, or the whole country had a nervous breakdown the next day. So just, I think there was almost a fear factor about how this game was going to play out, and you know, it winds up being a 3-3 tie. People say it worked out well for both sides. Montreal Canadiens fans will tell you that's not so. The game shouldn't have ended like that, but absolutely, it was an interesting hockey game. It was a good game with gusts to very good, but certainly not the best game at all ever, I think, in my mind.
If Ken Dryden had played a little better, it might not have been a close game. He gave up 3 goals on 13 shots, while Vladislav Tretiak made 35 saves. Ken Dryden stories, you have any you can share, Mike?
Probably not. No, I can, because I have a great deal of admiration for Ken. He's a very smart man. In fact, one of the great smart things he did when he was president of the Leafs was get him out of the Western Conference and get him back to the East where they belong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that really helped to rekindle a rivalry that had sort of just gone into fallow fields. It's too bad that Montreal and Toronto just kind of vanished as a rivalry. But when you're not playing each other, I mean, you can look down the highway at one another, but it's not the same thing. It is not, certainly even to this day, the Canadiens against the Bruins, but it is showing a comeback, and that's good because you need those two teams to be vital and to be playing well against each other and to actually be, you know, to put some spice into their games.
Now, New Year's Eve, you wore that classic mask. I think you have a little show and tell for us here this week.
I do. This was a mask that was made by Marc Poulin in Lachine, Quebec. Kenny signed this for me on the 29th of January 2007 when his sweater was retired. So if you try to imagine a goaltender in the National Hockey League wearing something like that.
You sure that's not Clint Benedict?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Now, Clint looked a little bit more like something out of Silence of the Lambs, I think, but no, you look at this, even with the adhesive tape and so on, it's remarkable. This mask would have been made by Bill Birchmore, who actually would have made the first mask that Jacques Plante would have worn in the National Hockey League. So Kenny wore something like this, exactly like this, actually, when he played goal. Actually, it was made for him in his first year in Cornell, and then he wound up going to the funny one with a target painted on it. But yeah, you look at goaltenders then. Carey Price has held this up to his face, and he just laughed at it. I mean,
PK Subban slap shot off of that.
Yeah, it'll just one. That's all it would take to destroy it.
Now, this is also the 30th anniversary edition of Ken Dryden's book, The Game. Michael, is this the best hockey book ever written, best sports book ever written? Where do you rate it?
It's absolutely the best hockey book ever written. What Dryden was able to do was to open a window and allowed the rest of us to peer into what really went on. And we got to see the game through the prism of his eyes, and I thought that's fascinating. Now, I have to add that Ken Dryden puts the pro in prolix. It is a little long, and there are certain sections where your eyes start going in opposite directions, and boom, you snap back.
Sort of like when Ken speaks.
It's pretty much like that, but it is a remarkable book, and it's mostly a remarkable book because Ken's a great observer and a terrific writer.
Yeah.
Dave, you did a 20 questions feature a few years ago on him. He had some interesting answers. None of them were less than 10 words, I would imagine.
No, exactly. I mean, people accuse me of writing long, and they're right, but hey, when I just let Ken go and I let his narrative go, I think the piece ran to about 3,000 words. I did it 10 years ago, and there were just a couple that I pulled out of it today. I asked Ken 16 Canadians players have worn your number 29 since you retired in 1979. How many can you name? And he looked and just said, Gino Odjick? So he remembered one of the 16. I asked him about his favorite Beatle and why, and that's normally a pretty easy question. You have your favorite Beatle, right? Well, he started off, I don't have an immediate answer the way others might. I like Ringo's name, I liked his odd eyes. I like John Lennon's voice, and Paul McCartney's hair moved the right way. George Harrison, I didn't notice him very much. But maybe the best one, I think, I said, what's the funniest comic strip of all time? And Ken Dryden literally dissolved into laughter for 5 minutes, and he kept laughing as we continued to talk. He loved Gary Larson's Far Side, and he talked about one that he remembered. He said, I remember one Far Side strip with one deer talking to another, and one has a bullseye on his chest, and the other saying, bummer of a birthmark, Hal. And Kenny just absolutely loved this one, and he could just recreate it, and he still laughs about it to this day.
Well, we're talking about that 1975 New Year's Eve game. There was another one in 1982 when the Soviet All-Stars beat the Canadians 5-0. Michael, could you imagine today basically an exhibition game, the NHL allowing that to happen on a New Year's Eve?
It might interfere with the Winter Classic the next day, so no, you wouldn't see anything like that. But it was a remarkable night. I was working for the Gazette at the time. I was in the press box. There was my New Year's Eve. But the ovation that Tretiak received, I believed it was about 5 minutes. Actually, I looked at my watch, and I recall it being 5 minutes, and people wouldn't stop. Now, that has been surpassed, I know, by the Rocket.
Right.
But at the time, it was the longest standing ovation in Montreal history, I think.
And it really did, I think, Mike, cement his star status, if you will, Tretiak's in Montreal. I mean, fans had gotten over the fact that he had come in here 3 years earlier and stoned Team Canada. Canada, of course, jumped out of the gate with 2 quick goals in the 72 Summit Series first game, and everyone figured it was going to be a blowout. And then, of course, you know, the Russians come back and put this entire country into a panic attack. Everyone was running off to see psychiatrists the next day. They had totally lost their minds. But it was fabulous to watch Tretiak play and to see the way he's been embraced by the city. This is his favorite city, actually, when he travels, when he comes to North America, and he said this is where he played his greatest hockey.
Well, he was a Canadian's draft choice.
Absolutely.
In fact, he retired in 1984 after the Soviet Union won gold in Sarajevo. And I think one of the reasons he retired at the age of 32 was because the Soviets wouldn't let him out to play, and he wanted to come to Montreal. Yeah,
but he is having an impact on the Canadians a bit because Stefan Waite worked with him in Chicago and has basically said that Vladislav Tretiak was his hero, and he's working miracles with Carey Price this year. We're going to be right back after a short break. We'll talk a little bit about the Heritage Classic games, which were a bone-chilling experience, as both of these gentlemen know, having covered them. And we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to Hockey Inside Out. It started as the Winter Classic. This year we have 6 outdoor NHL games, including one in LA where I guess they're going to hand out sunscreen before the game starts. Are they killing what used to be a good thing, Mike?
No, because there's a demand. Tickets go quickly. 23 of the 30 teams have asked to host, so clearly there's a demand. What bothers me is nostalgia for something that never existed. Meaningful games outdoors. Nobody played meaningful games outdoors. Tony Ludman did when he was a kid, 8 or 9 years old in Finland. Marcus Naslund did because he was from the poor side of Ernst-Goldensvik. Peter Forsberg got to play indoors as a kid, but Marcus Naslund had to. I mean, basically none of these guys ever played games that count, and we get to see them play games that matter and can affect playoff races.
Hey, you know what? If you want to make these things legit outdoor games and celebrate outdoor hockey, let's use blobs of snow as the goalposts.
That's right. And frozen Javex bottles.
Exactly. Have the kids shove Life magazines down their stockings for their shin pads. Right?
Throw one of those orange road hockey balls out there.
And the fact is, I mean, we're all going to watch these games. I mean, we'll put them on, and there's the fascination factor of seeing crowds and playing in these enormous facilities and so on. But the fact of the matter is that the hockey is really pretty bad. The quality of the game isn't that good.
Well, John Collins, who's the Chief Financial Officer, or COO rather, of the NHL, and this is his idea of what the league should be. It should be about events. It should be about big things. We shouldn't be worried about the 1,230 games as much as the events, and that's his vision, and it's worked very well. There's an economic imperative to moving it outside, and when we see the salary cap rise, a lot of it is the new TV contract, but a lot of it is also the impact of the outdoor
And
games.
it's servicing the sponsors too, right? These
Sure.
things are orgies of sponsorship. The All-Star game, I mean, you have to duck to avoid being hit by logos. I mean, anytime you turn around, right, signs are falling on your head.
That's
I mean,
right.
so, you know what, it's done for sponsorship. It's done to put the NHL on a stage where the average guy, maybe somebody sitting on his rocking chair in Alabama, is going to turn on his TV set in the afternoon and say, hey, look, Madge, they're playing hockey outdoors. Let's watch this. And they'll watch a few minutes of it, maybe.
But hockey outdoors in LA, really?
Actually, they have a new ice-making venue. They have no problem with... The last time the Kings played outdoors, remember they playing the Rangers in Vegas?
Yeah.
And there were crickets.
That's right.
There were crickets on the ice, and it was 90 degrees, and it was a mess. If I had to go to one outdoor game, it would be the one in Dodger Stadium.
And
Maybe
if
the
I'm
players
not
will need those flip-down baseball sunglasses.
If I'm
out
not
there or something.
mistaken, the Zamboni was, if it wasn't invented, it certainly was developed in California.
Yes,
So, I
it
mean,
was.
there you go. If the Zamboni machine is created there, hey, let's do it. And which brings the question, why does a Zamboni have headlights? Nobody can really effectively answer that question, presumably because they go outside to dump the snow. I don't know.
Well, they had the outdoor game in Pittsburgh at night, a game in which Crosby was concussed.
That's right.
And it was played in the rain, a game that should have never been played.
Yeah.
Now, the Heritage Classic, which this all started in Edmonton, was like 30 below zero. You gentlemen have both covered those events. How cold was it, Michael?
Well, I'm the indoor hockey writer at Sports Illustrated. After that experience, Stu, there is hype and then there's hypothermia. And we experienced it both that day. I went into the stands very briefly, and there's some fellow who had his beer, it froze. It was like a slushy, a beer slushy. And I said, this can't work. And I remember Stefan Quintal, Canadians defenseman at the time. He wasn't wearing any extra underwear.
Do you think he was a linebacker or what?
Well, his nickname was Q. It wasn't IQ.
Well, the game that I did in 2011 in Calgary, the Heritage Classic, and they throw the word classic on there. I still don't, I mean, I don't know. I mean, classic is used in everything in sports, but I remember how cold it was, and I remember, well, the game you went to, that was the one that Jose Theodore famously put the toque on, and the Canadians made a mint marketing those suckers. Well, I remember the game in 2011, James Wisniewski, the game before in Edmonton, had been struck in the eye by a puck, and we weren't sure that he was going to play. Well, he comes down standing at rinkside on the Saturday before practice, and he's got this cage on, and he has some sort of a headband on underneath it, and his eye is swollen out, and it's black, and you just see this steam coming out from under him, saying, I'm actually here to cover National Hockey League. The thing that amazed me more than any of it was the alumni game they played the day before was freaking cold as well. And I remember going into the dressing room at McMahon Stadium afterwards, and there was Sergio Momesso having a hot chocolate. And I said, how wrong is this, Sergio? You're having hot chocolate? And he said, you think I'm drinking anything cold? You're dreaming.
But I think you hit a really salient point there, because the players actually like it. It's a break from the routine, and something stirs in them that takes them back to the hot chocolate days of their youth.
And part of it is just getting tickets for their families. You hear there's such a huge demand.
It was so cold in Calgary that they couldn't make good ice. Now, how strange does that sound? They could not put an ice resurfacing machine out on the rink. They actually had to go out with hoses and shovels, because if a Zamboni machine went out on the ice, it would have broken the surface that they were playing on. So they actually had to go the old school route of hoses and shovels.
Now, all these outdoor games going on, do you think we'll ever get one in Montreal?
Well, Montreal came close a couple of years ago, but it would have been at the Olympic Stadium. Now, is that an indoor-outdoor game or an outdoor-indoor
You're the
game?
one who famously wrote about Olympic Stadium, what, the building with a roof in the basement? You're the one who wrote that.
I did. So we have a roof. So, yeah, Montreal wants one, and I'm sure it will get one. Winnipeg is a more logical place for it. Yeah, but Montreal will be in this rota, as they say about British Open golf courses.
Now, Montreal was host of the 1977-78 World Junior Championship, which was Wayne Gretzky's coming out party as a 16-year-old. It's returning again next year. Do you think we'll fill the Bell Center this time? I know when Wayne Gretzky played in the semifinal game, there was 2,200 fans at the Forum when they lost to Sweden.
The World Juniors have become the bowl season of Canada.
Yeah.
And people are home. They have time, they get involved, and TSN has done a fabulous job of essentially making something out of nothing, making people care about players that they probably don't know much about.
Absolutely. And what you find about this is that you put these kids on the stage wearing Team Canada jerseys and making them representatives of the country. The pressure on them is enormous. And we create a lot of that pressure as well. The way the media build this thing up, it's an amazing experience for these kids. They'll come back and they'll tell you how their lives are changed forever. But what, Canada hasn't won this thing since 2009, I think now. So it's never a matter of Canada going and winning silver. It's a matter of Canada going and losing the gold.
And in the rest of the world, this tournament doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
It's all about Canada.
Well, this year the 16-year-old phenom to watch is going to be Connor McDavid. To everybody out there, I hope you have a happy holidays and a safe holidays. We'll be back with a new Hockey Inside Out show in the first week of January. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Happy holidays to both of you. And Dave, your bow tie is still
please.
undone.
It'll be tied up next time, right?